The first goal of the Howie Carr Show, whether it's on radio or TV, is to entertain the largest possible audience. We like to have a lot of sound cuts. We like to have a lot of guests. We had Ann Coulter on today. We're trying to set up Pat Buchanan for tomorrow. We're trying to work out a system so that we can actually Skype them onto the show, so you can see them on your TV screen on Newsmax.
This is what is called the back tag and the reminder here in the television industry, because Howie Carr, I knew Howie, and as a matter of fact, listened to him a long time when I lived in Boston for several years. He is the man who makes it and just stirs the drink. Always gets a lot of good conversation. He's now on Newsmax TV. You can see him simulcast at 4 p.m. Eastern Time every day. It started today. So make sure you join us tomorrow, Tuesday, 4 o'clock Eastern Time for the Howie Carr Show, now on Newsmax TV.
If we get cheated out of a win in Pennsylvania, which is such a vital state, especially when I know what's happening here, folks. I know she can't beat what's happening here. The only way they can beat it, in my opinion, and I mean this 100%, if in certain sections of the state they cheat, okay?
Okay. We are of late awash in talk of how the general election come this November can be fixed. Altered, worked, rigged, if you will, despite the fact that to alter the outcome of a national election of this size and importance would be virtually impossible and potentially take millions of people and even more hundreds of millions of dollars. Maybe. Fixing an election is one thing, but there is something else that could be fixed much easier, much less effort, and it's done every day right out in front of everybody with so few questions asked. Your comments on what we will discuss here are front and center. All you have to do is dial us up at 1-877-NEWSMAX, 1-877-639-7629. Our guest has a tight focus on this element of the American voting machine. He is the CEO of Edgeworth Economics and author of EVERYDATA, the misinformation hidden in the little data you consume every day. Welcome, Dr. John Johnson, to the Hardline. Dr. Johnson, thanks for being here. Let's go ahead and get to work and talk some numbers, if you will. First of all, I want to show everybody some basic numbers here from the states that are coming in. Monstrous margins that we have seen right now that really seem to be almost too incredible to believe. What Donald Trump has and what Hillary Clinton has. Donald Trump in Idaho up 21, up 24 in Oklahoma, up 27 in West Virginia. Not a lot of electoral votes there. Meantime, Hillary Clinton monstrously 22 points in California, 17 in New York, some say 30, and 30 points in Massachusetts. Is it not fair to say that, just to go ahead and begin the discussion here, that every poll, no matter who it is, no matter who does it, no matter how they do it, it has an element of uncertainty into it. It is not scientific, and we need to keep saying that over and over again?
Well, look, it is absolutely the case that every single poll has what we call bias. I wouldn't call it unscientific as much as I would say the way the questions are asked, the way the surveys are conducted means that certain things will swing the results potentially, sometimes small ways, sometimes in large ways. Now, the states you just mentioned are sort of traditional Republican or Democratic states. And although those numbers are very large, those particular states are states that traditionally have gone either Republican or Democrat. They're rarely considered what we call the battleground states. So they're interesting, but the ones we really want to watch closely are the other states that are closer and seem to see the spreads are growing.
Why should we be so concerned about the rigging of a poll when, in essence, it's only opinion, it's only a snapshot, it's asked of a very specific group of people with a specific question, and as voters, don't we have the opportunity to listen to them, not to listen to them, but in the same breath, do our homework and find out if they're real, if they're true?
I think that's absolutely right. I mean, what I always talk about when I talk to audiences about polling is that the polls are providing information, but it's incumbent upon the voter to figure out what they believe and what they don't. There are some simple things that even if you're not particularly love statistics or polling, you can still look at things like what are the types of questions that are asked, or who are the people that were surveyed, the number of people that were surveyed in these polls. So I think the other thing to be really careful about is look for what we call outliers, the polls that look very, very different with their results than every other poll. I think one of the things that's striking right now is so many of the polls are kind of moving in the same direction, both the national polls and the state polls, showing fairly significant leads for Hillary Clinton. That should actually give us some comfort about the state of the race because they are consistent, but that doesn't mean we should just completely abandon common sense. We should just take them at their face value. We still have to look closely at them to make sure we understand what the assumptions are and how they're being constructed.
One of my favorite sayings is always common sense is not as common as we would like to say sometimes. And you also use the word assumptions in there, which my grandfather always taught me meant something very special. Now, when we talk about where the polls come from, is it not fair to say, for instance, here's the LA Times, the Los Angeles Times, a major market newspaper in the second largest market in America today, with their head-to-head polls from August to July. We go right down the line here, and they show that Donald Trump is fading fast because now they have him down 4% to Hillary Clinton, when at one point he was up by 7%. Is not it fair to say that when you have the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, the Dallas Morning News, the Chicago Tribune, the various universities, the major polling outlets who've been doing this for a long time, that while people may not agree with them, you're more likely to be able to trust them than some of these outliers and websites we have out there who, simply put, haven't been doing it very long?
Yeah, I completely agree with that as well. I mean, the LA Times is a great example. There's a poll that actually had consistently had Donald Trump up and had his sort of generally a little bit of a skew towards a Republican bias. And the fact that that poll over the time you just showed now shows a Hillary Clinton lead, that's the kind of thing I say looking at the trends. A really good thing your viewers can do to help educate themselves is that when you think about what's going on in the race, look within the same poll in the same polling organization. So if you are interested in the LA Times poll, look at the LA Times poll over time. Look at the USC poll, look at the Rasmussen poll. See what the trends are doing in those polls. That's a very good way to see. That way you're not combining different survey methodologies. You know, USC does it one way, Rasmussen does it another way, Quinnipiac a third way. As I said, the striking thing right now, and you just mentioned this, they're all breaking the same way. That's the part that should have the Trump campaign very concerned.
And when you talk about the way that they go, is it not fair to say that you've got to look at what basically is the fine print on a lot of these polls, because you have to see what are the demographics? Did they ask older males, older females, younger males, the area that they looked at, the region that they looked at, the questions that they asked, but specifically the type of person they're asking? Is that not really the major key here?
Oh, absolutely. Because what the point of a poll is, you know, one of the powerful things about the science of statistics is we can actually look and represent the views of a very large number of voters, you know, trying to get at the 130 million voters. You know, the ultimate poll is election day. But with these sampling and these surveys, you're basically looking at 1,000 or 500 voters. And so in order for that to have any real meaning to us, it has to be representative of the broader group of voters. So there the key really is, who did they ask? Does it line up with the demographics? Polling agencies spend a tremendous amount of time trying to make their samples representative. Do they have the right number of Democrats or Republicans? Do they have the right number of men and women? Whether they ask people over the internet or by phone can generate different results. And you can actually find all those results on every reputable polling website. They list exactly what that is for every single survey.
So let me ask you this. The basic question that we're talking about here. Can you rig a poll? Or for that matter, why would you want to if there's so many of them and they come at you so fast and furious? And if you look at the numbers and if you look at the demographics, that should give you all the answers. So isn't it fair to say rigging a poll is useless?
Yeah, I actually agree completely. It is somewhat useless. I think the point is the notion of some broad systematic conspiracy to rig all the polls is kind of silly. There's no way that that could actually be pulled off given all of these different agencies. What I think could happen, and I think we just have to be careful, is the tendency you might hear candidates cherry pick the one poll that sort of has them in the lead, or the one poll that sort of points to the favorable demographics for them in terms of policy, in terms of the results and the like. So what's far more likely is either a politician taking a poll out of context, the media trying to create a narrative out of a single poll and not looking at it in its totality. I think that's the issue. Now, in this year, because the results are all sort of moving in the same direction, we're actually seeing the same narrative emerge. But earlier in the campaign, when the polling was a little bit closer, you could see from a day-to-day basis, you'd literally see stories. Oh, Trump's ahead today. Oh, Clinton's ahead today. And that was actually kind of misleading when the result was actually pretty close early on. It said it's widened now. But even this far out, polling historically still at 80 days out is still not really on the mark. Over the next 2 to 3 weeks, if these polls don't change, you can begin to be a lot more confident that the result is going in this direction.
It's not scientific. We need to say that over and over again. Real quick, Tom is in Beaumont, California. Tom, I only got 20 seconds. Tell us, do you believe the polls?
No,
Why not?
because God knows everybody's conscience, and he's going to intervene because we are Gentiles, and if we forget Israel, we will lose.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Goodbye.
Well, one way or another, you're going to get somebody in there to tell you exactly who to vote for. God only knows. You can hope it's common sense. The book, again, is EVERYDATA, the misinformation hidden in the little data you consume every day. And we have talked about some of that little data. People read. Dr. John Johnson, a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us and putting, oh, wait a minute, there's those words, common sense again, to a little bit of the discussion. My goodness, I don't know how we're going to do that. Thanks a lot, Doctor. We appreciate your time. Hey, don't forget, we have now moved on DirecTV to channel 366. Make sure you're joining us there. Tell your friends on DirecTV. Newsmax is now on JLTV 366. Next, a weekend of unrest in an American city started by a police shooting. Can we see our way out of doing it all over again? Next.